From July 18th to August 30th, 1987, Fuji TV held a massive World's Fair-esque event for over 5 million total attendees, with the purpose of hyping up what they called a new generation of media. Basically, a massive promo for their upcoming fall lineup of shows, as well as an ongoing part of Haruo Kauchi's long-term revitalization plan for the brand, showcasing cutting-edge information communication technologies. For this event, one of their many partnerships formed was with Nintendo. Fuji Terebi commissioned Nintendo to make a game for the event that used the characters they had designed specifically to promote it, being Imogen, Lina, Papa, Mama, and Piki. For technically being a licensed game, you'd think the bar wouldn't need to be high, but Nintendo went all out in creating an inventive, distinctive platforming game complete with unique characters, a charming aesthetic, Easter eggs referencing the event, and a robust physics engine. Nintendo incorporated elements from all their first-party hits into this game, in an adventure that would take players through worlds, deep underground, across the sea, and high into the sky. It's Yume Kōjō, Doki Doki Panic, for the Famicom Disk System. An innovative classic taken for granted. It's said online that Yume Kōjō Doki Doki Panic translates to Dream Machine, heart-pounding panic in English, because Doki Doki is the onomatopoeia for the sound a heartbeat makes in Japanese. But this, to me, overlooks an opportunity at a more accurate translation using one of the English onomatopoeias for what a heartbeat sounds like thump thump, or ba-dum ba-dum. So wouldn't something more like Thump Thump Panic get at the heart of it? Anyway, Doki Doki Panic is how it's most often referred to in the West, and that's what I'll be calling it for the remainder of this video. Doki Doki Panic is a one-of-a-kind platforming adventure that takes place inside of a storybook. You play as the flagship characters from the Yume Kōjō festival, Imogen, Lina, Papa, and Mama, on a quest to rescue the young twins, Poki and Piki, from the clutches of Mamu, a giant alligator-like monster that was able to reach through the confines of the book Poki and Piki were reading in the opening cutscene. You see, what happened was, Poki and Piki were arguing when they ripped out the last page of said book. The book itself was a story about the dream world of Mu, a land in which the quality of the weather was determined by the quality of dreams had the night before. Implicating something of the nightmarish variety could result in tornadoes, hail, firestorm, fire tornadoes, turbo volcanoes, and the like. Because of this, the people of Mu, presumably these guys, invented a dream machine to make it so they always had good dreams, thus always good weather. Little sus if you ask me, but moving on. Mamu, the monster I mentioned earlier, invaded the land of Mu and commandeered the dream machine to make nightmarish monsters like these and these, or even worse, these. Ew! Look at it! The people of Mu, however, rose to defeat him after discovering his one weakness, an intense dislike of vegetables. And that was all she wrote. They rescued the dream machine and made it so they all had good dreams again. They actually had already defeated Mamu, but that's the issue with Pokey and Peaky. They ripped out the last page, which detailed the resolution of the story, thus breaking the hermetic alchemical seal placed on demon entity Mamu, allowing him to reach across dimensions and snatch Pokey and Peaky. Because of this, you jump into this story to create a new resolution of your own. The only issue is you've got to do it 4 times, once with each character. And that's where the adventure begins. You guys going to bed? Doki Doki Panic follows a very easy to understand structure. It's quite literally laid out before you as you make your selection as to which character you want to make progress with, both as you start the game and each time you complete a world. You have to make it through 7 different worlds, collecting a crystal from each stage with each of the 4 characters. Each world containing 3 different stages, with the exception of the final world, which only contains 2. What that means is you're gonna have to beat all 20 stages 4 times in total if you want to see the true ending of this game, which, if you're counting, equals 80 total individual challenges you need to overcome. Now, that might seem a little daunting, and it is, doing it 4 times over and whatnot. But believe it or not, it's part of what makes the game. Each of the 4 characters control and operate uniquely. They each have advantages and disadvantages when it comes to approaching all the different kinds of challenges that the game throws your way. Some stages might be easier to complete with Imogen, and others may be more efficient to tackle with Lena. Some jumps may be cake with Mama, but seem near impossible with Papa. It all comes down to the type of challenge posed by each individual stage. Once you complete a world with one character, you can choose either to do it again with the next, or to push further and see what the next world holds in store. So if you hated one world and you weren't really ready to tackle it again in a row, you could just press on with the same character to the next world. The game lets you approach it how you want. What I found though was that playing through a world might be somewhat miserable with one character, but decently fun with another. So even if I didn't like a world with, say, Mama, the same world could be a lot of fun with Papa. The D-pad's for movement, A is for jump, B is for picking up and throwing and dropping items, holding down can get you a super jump, and there's no sprinting in this game. A note about picking up things though, you have to be on top of them to pick them up. A lot of this game has to do with picking up and lifting objects over your head, and that comes in play a lot with how the characters differ from one another. The first character is Imogen. Imogen is pretty much the main character, and he's the all-arounder type. If this were Mario Kart, for example, this would be Mario, only you wouldn't have to be a psycho to pick him. He's good at everything, but mostly lacks the ability to cheese sections of the game because it feels like the stages were designed with him in mind first. He's decently good at jumping, lifting, throwing, and handling. And this is an instance where the images in the manual are actually perfect for describing what he is and what he's good at. Lena is Imogen's girlfriend and has the most unique ability in the game from a character standpoint, because by holding the A button after you do a jump, she's able to hover in the air. This is a blessing for so many different stages in the game, but the downside is that she's incredibly weak. She struggles to lift objects out of the ground, and so when you're surrounded or trying to get through something or lift something quickly, it's certainly prone to cause some heart-pounding panic. Bottom panic. Doki Doki Panic. And one thing about Lena that's worth noting, and this is going to tie in a little bit to how the structure of the world works, is that many stages end with a Catherine encounter. This is Catherine. And since you have to pick up objects to defeat Catherine, it can often be just about the most difficult to face her with Lena. Hold on! I died a lot with this character, especially in the Catherine fights. Picking up the eggs, it's just hard to do because it takes you so long to lift them even right out of midair. And since you have to pick up objects to defeat Catherine, namely these eggs, it can be just about the most difficult to face her with Lena. I died a lot with this character. Mama, to me, is easily the worst to play with. I could definitely see a lot of people disagreeing with me on this one, but she just handles terribly. She has the benefit of the highest jump in the game, and she's slow to fall, so she can basically hover, but that creates more problems in my experience than it solves. She's slippery and floaty, but she is definitely a godsend for any stage that makes heavy use of these vines. She can practically warp between them and jump to the next with beauty and grace. Whereas Imogen and Papa are fighting for their lives.
Her sister was a witch, right?
Papa rules. Papa is blessed. Papa is the fastest falling, shortest jumping, quickest ripping cowboy this side of Moo Falls. He is also the fastest character in the game when holding a heavy object over his head. and that's kind of his gimmick. He's usually my go-to pick, but there are some stages that are definitely the most difficult with Papa. I just appreciate his fast fall, quick draw, and tight handling. Looking back at the worlds, they all follow a pretty similar structure aside from the last one, with the first two stages presenting you with a basic idea or concept, usually with the second elaborating on the ideas presented in the first, and the third stage leading you to some form of fortress with a vertical dungeon-like structure or tower, and a proper big boss fight at the end. There are lots of secrets throughout the game, some that let you skip multiple worlds, and most found using a mechanic I have yet to explain called black screen. And there's strong incentive to play around and interact with everything you can find in these environments in search of secrets like coins and hidden exits. Speaking of the black screen thing though, nothing else in this game is going to fully make sense without me explaining it. So let's do that now. The black screen is a unique mechanic to Doki Doki Panic that utilizes the magic lamp item to create a door anywhere with solid ground in a stage that will take you to a mirrored world of whatever is currently displaying on your screen. Your first time playing, and mine as well, you're likely to just plop this down relatively close to where you picked it up, just to see what it does. And once you see, it kind of unlocks something in you as a player. It quite literally adds an additional layer to the game. Something more to pay attention to, something to be mindful of. Everything you're looking at, you're processing on another level from that moment on. Secrets could be around any corner. You're free to carry the lamp with you quite far in most instances, and if you manage to hold on to it, your patience is sometimes rewarded. I found several secret warps this way, but that's not the main thing they're useful for, to be honest. What you're doing here is developing an eye, first and foremost to find hearts, which are not shown, and to find coins, which are. The vegetable stalks are what become coins in the black screen, but the hearts can be anywhere. Similar to finding secrets in the first Legend of Zelda, if you pay attention, you start to develop a sort of sixth sense for where the hearts may be located. If you find one, it'll give you an extra hit point of damage as a buffer against the enemies and their projectiles. And if you're really good, you can sometimes find two. The coins are equally important to the hearts though. The coins are what, at the end of the level, have the potential to translate into lives by gambling. While there are one-up equivalents that can be found in certain stages, they're really rare. And it's basically through this slot machine screen at the end of every stage that you shoot your shot at more lives. The more coins you find in the black screen, the more chances you have at scoring more lives, which are a scarce resource that matter much more than you might think. I died a ton playing this game. Way more than I anticipated for something with such cutesy graphics. And like, you think I would have learned my lesson from Adventure Island. What is this? What is this? But I died constantly. I didn't beat any world on the first try. I game overed in every world at least once. And the process of dying over and over is what helped me learn better places to throw the lamp. Also, where all the lamps even were. Because if you rip a veggie before tossing a lamp, it won't show in the black screen. So knowledge of where everything is becomes a big factor to making it through and very beneficial when you're tackling a world you've already beaten with a new character. Now, the coins I mentioned are for a gambling game. This is critical. I was somewhat of the mindset that it was just totally random when I was first trying to get lives because it seemed way too fast for me to react to. I was just mashing buttons. I wasn't even sure what combos could lead to more lives. But I learned by the end that you actually can time it. And I got to the point where I could hit cherries about half the time, which guarantee a 1-up. I also had no idea what to shoot for originally. I didn't really understand what was netting me lives and what wasn't, but I came to realize through playing, and also the manual, these basic principles. 1. 3 of the same item will net you a 1-up. 2. If you get cherries, it doesn't matter what you get for the other 2, you still get a 1-up, so prioritizing this is the most important thing you can do. 3. If you get multiple cherries, that's where the magic happens. 2 cherries in a row is a 2-up. And 3 is a 5-up. Now, as I said earlier, I died a shit ton playing this game. A good bit of dying with whoever I chose to play a world with first. They're actually called chapters. I should call them chapters, but they're worlds. And a good bit of dying with Mama. because I sucked with Mama. Or was it Mama who sucked? Sorry, Mom. Also, Lena. I would really struggle on stages with the Catherine fights when I was playing as Lena. But the idea is that the instances in which I was running low on lives towards the end of the final stage, whatever chapter I was on, -3, those instances were plentiful. And in that way, lives become extremely valuable. I only got a 5-up twice during my playthroughs of this game. And let me tell you, the pop-offs were monumental. This game had me feeling emotions. You remember emotions? Feelings?
You remember feelings, right? Yeah, I have feelings every single day of my life.
My dokier was doking hard. Relating to lives though, and how I tackled this game personally, your lives stick with you for the duration of your play session. You are only allowed to save your game upon getting a game over. So if you need to stop playing, it's one of those games where you'll have to lose all of your lives to save. Fortunately, given my frequent deaths, this never took long. But it ties into how I approached beating this game personally. I should mention a note, quick aside, about saving. This game doesn't let you delete your save. So when I was first starting this game, trying to play it, there was already some stages complete. And I checked around. Turns out you can get rid of that save file, but only by doing a super jank method. You have to put the floppy disk in, load up the game, choose a character, and die 3 times to trigger a game over. Then you choose the save option. After that, you'll see the first of 2 wait screens. You do nothing at the first wait screen. It will eventually disappear for a brief moment, triggering a second wait screen. You wait there roughly a second or 2, and then you hit the reset button on your Famicom. I think it took me around 5 or 6 tries to get this. Anyway, moving on. Since the game is broken up naturally so nicely into chunks, rather than playing for really long sessions like I tend to do with most of these games, playing Doki Doki became a project that was spread out over roughly a week, with a rough goal of beating 1 world with every character each night. And I'll go ahead and admit that Doki Doki didn't always have me wanting to play more after completing these worlds. Usually I had the feeling of having enough Doki Doki by the time I was done. But not every game needs to be the kind that makes you feel like you have to keep playing. Sometimes a game with natural breakpoints like that can be taken for granted. And in fact, a lot of things about Doki Doki, I believe, are taken for granted. I've said this in prior episodes, but it bears repeating here. I didn't grow up with these games. I didn't have an NES. My knowledge as a kid, even of 16-bit titles, was extremely limited. It was basically limited to just Super Mario World and Zombies Ate My Neighbors. I played mostly Xbox, GameCube, and onward as a kid. NES games weren't even on my radar. So in my experience, coming back to play these titles, many games are in a state where you really have to learn how to play them. There's an adjustment period where you have to learn how the game works and how it handles movement as well as what the physics are, since most games were just winging it. There was no standard. They all worked differently. It was the Wild West, and that's part of what I find so refreshing and appealing about it. But every now and then you come across a game like this one, like Doki Doki Panic, where the movement and jumping and the controls feel so conventional and tight, you almost have to remind yourself you're playing a game that's almost 40 years old, because things just feel and control like you imagine they're supposed to. Playing this game in the context of its original release, you have to give it credit for everything it does so right when it comes to jumping and control, and even the physics when picking up and throwing objects. It's just so clean. And it's easy to forget that in the context of 1987, a lot of games with jumping felt a lot clunkier than this. It's also the first game I've played for the Famicom that has this idea of different characters being selectable, and they all play differently. That is wild. It's bold. It's not normal in 1987. Games are designed with one character and one set of physics in mind, and that's that. But Doki Doki is ambitious. No other game I've covered so far has this. It's also rare to have a side-scroller drop at this time that is also packed with so many towering vertical segments. Plus in Rygar or Kid Icarus, if you fell too far and touched the bottom of the screen, you died. But in Doki Doki, you just keep going. It's a true vertical scroller, and a lot of stages actually take advantage of this. This doesn't just feel like a demo of any of these concepts either. It nails them. And for someone like myself, I think I had to remind myself of this while I was playing. Since I wasn't there, unless I'm conscious as I play it, I think it's easy to play this game and not appreciate it for all these things it brings to the table, just because they're so normalized in modern game design. Doki Doki is pioneering and perfecting a lot of these ideas simultaneously. Just in terms of movement, it feels an order of magnitude better to control than the original Super Mario Bros., for example. Controversial? Maybe? No matter what your preference is between these two games, I think it's easy to agree that Doki Doki Panic would feel more natural to control. Natural to control in terms of pure platforming. But what is a platformer even? Doki Doki is thought of as a platformer. There's no ongoing debate, really, that's just what it's listed as. But the thing is, in my experience, Doki Doki is undoubtedly an adventure game as well. What is the draw of this game? What do you play this game for? What makes a platformer a pure platformer? Where are the lines drawn in the sand? When does something become an action adventure or a Metroid-like? I bring this up because while Doki Doki Panic is certainly a platformer, I feel like the kind of gameplay it brings to the table warrants a second or third descriptor. Like, it's true that this game has a lot in common with a lot of the more platforming-centric titles that Nintendo had published up to this point. It shares its sense of verticality with Ice Climber and Kid Icarus. It borrows its world structure in part from Super Mario Bros., with the stages separated into worlds with dashes and bigger castle-like structures with boss fights capping off the worlds. It even has a little bit of Zelda baked in there as well. If I were to look at all the games I've covered so far for this system, the most platformingest platformer would be Adventure Island. You play that game for the platforming. Ironically, adventure is in the title, but it's much less of an adventure than something like Doki Doki Panic. And even much less of an adventure than something like the original Super Mario Bros. Mario 1. Like, when you pick up this game, what is intriguing about it? Are you playing it to make sick jumps and jump on platforms? Or is that just the method of delivery for what you're really after? Being an adventure through different worlds full of things to look at and secrets to find. When you die in Doki Doki Panic, it's the pits that get you sometimes. But honestly, probably more so, it's the enemies and bosses. And pits are probably even more likely to be the cause of death in Castlevania than this game. Though, to be fair, it's often an enemy pushing you into a pit in that instance. Like, when it comes to problem solving in this game, it's often jumping that's the answer, but not always. You don't defeat enemies by jumping, for example. At least, jumping is used in conjunction with something else. Like, taking a turn to contemporary titles, games like Super Meat Boy, Celeste, Super Mario Maker, these are platformer-ass platformers. Doki Doki has a little more spice. If you're looking at it with your platformer goggles on, it's a little underwhelming. But if you've got your adventure sunglasses on top of those glasses, or you've got transitions, this game really starts to show its appeal. I get that this may seem like a dumb or unnecessary conversation to have, but the main point I'm trying to make is just that the platforming isn't really what the game's about. It's about having an adventure. It's a plat-venture. It's a platforming adventure. Doki Doki Panic has two great strengths, one being its fluid controls, and the second being its wealth of well-executed ideas. Every world, every stage, every enemy, every item. Everything is handled with care. Every moment exploring, elaborating, or expanding on ideas. I'm not saying it's the greatest of all time or anything. It's not close. But credit where credit's due, there are a lot of really intelligent design decisions present in Doki Doki Panic, and I think it's worth studying. I really came to appreciate a lot of them through my multiple trips through each stage with each character and countless deaths. The game flexes a robust variety of locales through the grassier worlds, the waterfall worlds, the deserts, the icy ocean, the sky, and deep under the crust of Mu's surface. Every stage building upon ideas presented in stages prior, either in increased difficulty or just brand new ideas. So within this world of ideas, I want to take a moment to highlight some of the things that really stood out to me from my own journey. 1-1, the first stage. In the first stage, I really like how the right option to complete it has you working your way through a vertical segment. It starts by dropping you down and then it asks you to climb up. It's also a wonderful, playful introduction to all of the game's basic mechanics and the Catherine boss encounters. The second stage doesn't hold back either, introducing even more ideas to the player. You have to hijack a magic carpet to even make it to the stage proper, and it shows the player in a contained area how concepts like pots, keys, the enemy called commons, and locked doors work. Then it guides you through the inside of this hill where you play with the physics and the bombs to get your bearings. And then in the final stage of the first chapter, 1-3, it leads you to a place where your skills and everything you learned are put to a much more serious test. The basic concept of the first main dungeon asks you to make your ascent, then your descent, dodging enemies and running scared from the commends and a dash to the bottom, which in turn leads you to your first boss encounter with Don Chiruge. It's all a very natural experience. It's not complex to the point you get stuck not knowing what to do, but it's also not simple to the point where you're asking yourself why you're playing. If anything, the question on my mind was more along the lines of, I wonder what secrets I'm missing here. There has to be something. The first world sets the stage for the others, and each of the others have their own set of ideas that they play with and elaborate on as well. World 2, for example, introduces quicksand. It also introduces these movable mask blocks and introduces extra elements of risk to the Catherine encounters. And its end-of-world dungeon asks you to journey deep down beneath the sand to take on a Hydra-like enemy called Gobcho that you can only beat with the stackable mask blocks introduced earlier in the world. World 3 is actually a personal favorite of mine. 3-1 has this absolutely massive waterfall you have to scale. Then you have to hijack a magic carpet, just like in stage 1-2, but this time you use it to take it high into the clouds and climb a vine to the rest of the stage. What's so cool here though is that there's a secret in plain sight if you make a mistake. And this is something I didn't notice until I accidentally failed the first with Papa my final time through the world. Because of his short ass jump. You fall down this huge gorge until you reach this tiny rock formation with a cave leading to a multifaceted secret. It's the layers of secrets that I find so playful here. You're presented with a long hallway of vegetables, a pot, and a door. You have the choice to either stock up on coins and continue with the level as normal, or use the lamp and go through the pot to warp you all the way to chapter 5. The Catherine fight at the end of the stage here is also a multi-threat, and I feel like each character I felt more comfortable approaching it with differently. I'm really impressed by this stage. It doesn't let up either because stage 3-2 is probably the most beautifully designed regular stage in the entire game, and I mean that. The game has shown you layers at this point, but now it starts to play with them. And again, it's that playfulness that I really appreciate about Doki Doki Panic. It's not afraid to experiment. As you make your way from the left to the right, you're making your way over the rest of the stage that you need to complete, and you can see it. You see where you need to go before you get there, and then once you get there, you've got to work through an additional underground segment that's a little more complex than what we've seen before. It asks a little bit more of you, and this weaving and winding path you have to take to complete the stage I found really clever. And then 3-3 is something special. This is the first big hurdle for me, like having to make multiple attempts at the world with multiple characters. Extremely basic lead up to the dungeon, but that's because the dungeon is massive and it takes everything you know into account. Its primary features are a large ascent, a large descent trying to escape commons, followed by an intense and lengthy climb to the top with lots of enemies to avoid. It almost reminds me of something you'd see in a castle in Super Mario World. The lengthy climb to the top has a lot of enemies, and it's a real test of your skill and your patience, and it also really starts to highlight the strengths and weaknesses of each individual character. Little detail here, but I also appreciate how it lets you make your way to the very top of the roof before attempting the boss. Really solid world, really great stuff. Lots of cool ideas. Man, I'm talking about this stuff way more than I planned to, but looking over it, I can't help myself. Chapter 4 is the Ice World, and it is the most difficult in the whole game, in my opinion, in terms of where it hits and what it asks of you to complete it. 4-1 introduces ice blocks, which are slippery, and it's a staple of the entire chapter as a whole. It also introduces the most relentless enemy type short of commons, being these little white snowmen. They do not stop chasing you, but you can get them to slide through the gaps in the ice if you position yourself just right. It's a challenging stage that took me a lot of tries to complete with everyone. And it also introduces the rocket ship, which is a recurring mode of transportation in both this chapter and the rest of the game. 4-2 might have been a stage I died in the most. Both phases of it challenge you in different ways. The flying guys, the Tondarias as they're called, fly at you in different patterns and formations in the first half, and the whale section in the back half, where you have to position yourself to jump on the water they're blowing out their blowholes, is also really difficult. Plus, it has the most dangerous Catherine encounter in the game thus far. And just in case I forget, the different color Catherines indicate their abilities. Pink only shoots eggs. Red shoots eggs and fire, so you have to be more cautious and can't just expect an egg or you'll get burned. And gray Catherines only shoot fire, so you have to use mask blocks or some other object you can throw to defeat them. But moving on, 4-3 presents a cool triple tower dungeon that mostly makes use of ice blocks and standing atop enemies' heads to avoid taking spike damage. It's actually not that bad despite its length, but the boss fight is the most challenging of the game so far, the most unique. He's a big fire guy called Hey Bobo that can only be snuffed out with the mask blocks. It's the baby fires that mostly get me though. It's also worth noting that the path to get to the triple towers is probably one of the most talked about aspects of this game. The level begins on a small isolated island, and there's a Catherine there. Once you figure out there's nowhere else to go, the way forward becomes clear. You ride the egg. It's one of the only things I knew about this game before going into it, and I imagine for people playing it at release, this would have felt super cool to discover. Floating on an egg over the sea. Chapter 5 is most easily recognizable for its black skies. 5-1 having a neat little puzzle where you have to avoid the projectiles from this flowering enemy called Punky. The art is very cute for the Punkies, by the way. But you have to avoid the Punky's spikes on 2 different layers. Or you can use this ostrich riding hey-ho, that's what these are called, hey-hos, to dispose of it. And once you complete that little puzzle, if you want to call it that, it takes you to probably the most pure platforming segment of the entire game. And it's good. It's a healthy challenge. It's also easier than it looks, so it makes you feel cool for completing it. 5-2 is a little more robust and involves a lot of interaction with these ladybug-like enemies called Tapins, climbing the tall palms. And it takes you up to the top of this giant hollowed out mountain where the game tests your falling reaction time with these spikes everywhere. My first time trying this place was actually with Papa. I found it after I went through the warp in stage 3-1, and I actually had made it all the way up to this point, and I had 1 life left, and I was like weaving in and out of the spikes, and right at the last one where if I had just dodged it, I would have made it. I died and I game overed. I dokied my doker. It also ends with a spicy Catherine encounter with a big gap right at about the distance you'd typically snatch an egg. Chapter 5's dungeon stage, 5-3, takes place very cleverly between 3 enormous trees, where you make your way up from the inside of one of their trunks. You walk past the base of the trees from above before descending to access them from underground where their roots are, calling back to stage 3-2 a little bit. The inside is very tricky and patience is rewarded, especially when dealing with the punkies here. But once you make it to the top of the first hollow tree, you actually hijack magic carpets to make it to the boss fight. It really brings so much about what you've learned together. And this is where Don Chiruge is at his most difficult, because the spike placements on the floor make it much harder to place bombs in the right spots here. Chapter 6 is the last main regular style of world, and to be perfectly honest, it is the least interesting to me overall, aside from some cool moments in 6-3. 6-1 features a more difficult retread of the challenges found in Chapter 2, but with a kind of annoying trial and error puzzle segment in the back half. 6-2 is visually appealing, but it ultimately amounts to just riding on the back of these pterodactyl-like enemies called Tondorus to a pretty easy Gray Catherine encounter. 6-3 has some sauce though. There's a shortcut right at the start if you go under the quicksand here, but I don't recommend taking it, to be honest. The stage is too fun. The level itself is fantastic. It's a giant sand cave full of bombs, and it finishes with a gigantic vine climb up to the pyramid in the sky. The boss fight is once again Gabsho, but it's interesting because you have to take down a fire Catherine immediately beforehand, likely netting you some damage and potentially a life. But then finally there is Chapter 7, the Dream Machine. The lead-up section in 7-1 is really aesthetic, and it has this really cool puzzle segment in the clouds where it's really hard to avoid taking damage, and if you jump, it actually sets you back. But the real star of the show is 7-2, the Dream Machine. The Dream Machine itself is massive. It would take too long to fully dive in and break down all of the cool things going on here, but it's honestly like a fully fledged Zelda dungeon, but from a platforming perspective. The whole place is teeming with ideas and secrets, and it puts you in a lot of unique pickles that test your mettle. It's probably my favorite dungeon in the game, even more so than 3-3, because it's just the complete package. And Mamu is the most fun and challenging boss fight in the game. Getting his timing down is a bit tricky at first though, and your doker may doke a little because defeat here would mean doing the whole massive dungeon again. This happened to me. It wasn't that bad though because it's a fun stage. And also, once you get him down with one character, you pretty much have him down with all the characters. And in case you were wondering, the ending just thanks the individual character you beat it with until you beat it with the fourth and final character that you choose. It could be any of them. And then it shows you the true ending of the game. So that's Doki Doki Panic. That's everything in the game. But I'd be remiss if I didn't give a condensed actual review of the game quickly. So if that's what you were waiting for, here is my review of Yume Kōjō Doki Doki Panic for the Famicom Disk System. Doki Doki Panic is an inventive game. It's a visually cohesive game. It's creative, fun, and it builds off the ideas it presents in smart ways. It's also a deceptively challenging game. I died way more than I expected to based on the graphics. It doesn't dwell on any single concept for too long. They don't overstay their welcome. Each world presents a healthy amount of new obstacles and ideas for you to learn and then master before it puts you to the test in the dungeons. The Catherine fights are fun, sometimes thrilling. Honestly, a true highlight for me. The way they built on themselves and how each character had to be wary of different things during the fight, I really admire. The end of world boss fights are also a blast, and Wart is especially good. The playfulness behind the lamp and the black screen mechanics encourage and often reward experimentation. And with no level timer or score to distract you, the game is really about taking your time and making sure you don't miss anything. It is a rock solid work from Nintendo. Better than it has any right to be. But personally, despite what sounds like really high praise, there are moments where I felt less drive to finish this game than I usually do. I found myself bumping up against the game a little bit in my quest to beat it with all 4 characters. Since I chose to approach the game one chapter at a time, beating it with each of the 4 characters before moving on, it left me feeling pretty done at the end of each of my play sessions. It's cool that it broke the game up into natural segments, but I just have to note that I usually feel more of an itch to continue playing than I did here. But I do think that that's partially attributed to how I chose to complete it, versus going through the whole game with one character and then the next, for example. But to end on a positive note, because I really believe this game deserves it, it's ultimately a very robust and feature-complete platforming adventure that gives you an impressive number of secrets to find and ways to play with its cast of playable characters. It is easy to recommend. All right. Final thoughts on Doki Doki Panic. Let's get real. Okay. In some ways, I feel like I want to like this game more than I actually like it. I really mean it when I say that it wasn't pulling at me so much in every play session to continue playing. I really also think a big part of this is because I beat it with every single character. It leaves me wondering if the game might be a little more fun to complete, like just through with one character, or even if you could switch between the characters between the worlds and you could pick which character you wanted to tackle each world with. But despite not really becoming addicted to the gameplay of this game, like I have so many others, I just respect it so much. And I feel like studying it just for its design choices is a worthwhile endeavor. A lot of times playing these games, I feel like I'm really just looking to get at what decisions were being made. Why did they make these decisions? What were they trying to make you feel? And I feel like with Doki Doki, they're trying to get your noggin jogging a little bit. They want you to think about where everything is placed. Everything has a purpose in this game. Every placement is meticulous. I also think that it's kind of neat that some of the characters I didn't like and I still beat it anyway because the final ending was enough of a pull for me. Like Mama, if you didn't have to beat it with all of the 4 characters, I probably wouldn't have beaten the game with Mama because she was the most frustrating to control for me. But I still did it, and I'm happy I did. And it also gave me a little more insight, I think, when contemplating the journey as a whole. The music is also something I probably should have touched on earlier, but it's great. Classic tracks. I feel like I've heard them somewhere else before. Anyway, it's a fun experience, and I'm thankful that you tagged along and watched through this whole thing. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.